Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another pregame show for the Champion Draft Series. Week 4 is upon us. Week 3 was, oh man, there are so many exciting, tight, close-up matches. And I've got Aikado with me here again, whose insights proved to be quite correct through a lot of last week. So we got him back on so that he can help you with your pick'ems for this week and show you what to expect, as well as talk about a lot of trades that occurred over the course of this last week. Balance patch changed a few things. A lot of people's strategies changed, so they wanted to adapt really quickly, used a lot of their limited season trades, and even traded with did we have any player? I don't think we had any player trades. I think we just had a lot of the limited undrafted champ pool trades used up. So there's not as many in the pool now as there used to be. But Aikado, how you been? You're just coming off another Aegis win, right?
Yeah, just one Aegis, so we're riding high right now. It is funny looking at the patch. I hadn't thought too much about the CDS implications, but especially with how many people were just jamming as many Cosmic Call decks as possible. I watched Cephalopod's video where he was talking about his plan this week. He's like, Cosmic Call is broken, and I'm just going to run it, as much as I can. It's like, oh, well, that didn't age well. That timelines, there's quite a few things that, massively impacted players.
Yeah, it's cool to see because we've sort of been Champion Draft Series has been in like an internal meta for like a few weeks now, where like the rest of the community is sort of just jumping into it and seeing how things change. So it's interesting to see how we in our limited formats have sort of like adapted to that sort of thing. However, one of our players here was pretty confident with their lineup overall. Didn't get involved in any trades. I'm talking about Majin Bey of the Ionian Idiots. How do you feel about their roster now that they've had these sort of changes into the patch? How do you feel, Aikado, about the strength of Majin's current roster?
It's really awkward because Majin has brought Cosmic Call. Did he bring the same exact lineup again? I think he did, right?
He changed his third deck for like Thresh Yumi instead of Thresh Nasus, but otherwise, and he's thrown in a few tech cards. He's changed his Cosmic Call deck list to be a little bit stronger into the aggro opponent he placed last week. But overall, he's been pretty consistent of Rise and like Cosmic Call P and Z.
Yeah. So he brought in a different Cosmic Call deck, went for the double Cosmic Call. And the issue is, I'm looking at Majin's lineup, and he has this Jason Heimerdinger that, both have received nerfs, right? If he drafted that for that deck, that doesn't really exist anymore. The Cosmic Calls that he's been bringing every single week, and he brought 2 of last week, just got nerfed. It feels like Majin's going to have trouble building a lineup from here. You're very limited at this point. I don't know what are actual good decks that he can put together. Like, you can't really play Cosmic Call anymore. It very much got unprinted, right?
Yeah.
So trying to come up with he's probably still going to bring Rise like every week, but after that, like what's left for him?
We talk about like the issues of coming up with a third deck for your roster, but in some cases, Majin might struggle for a second deck. It's like Thresh Nasus, I guess, right? Like, sure,
he's playing Thresh Nasus, he's playing Rise. His lineup doesn't make a ton of sense, and then he's just gonna spitball together a third deck, and I don't know. I'm definitely concerned for Majin. And so many people did engage with the trades with the patch, and I'm surprised Majin didn't, and maybe would benefit from having a couple trades to go through.
Well, maybe he's pretty confident in his lineup currently, and depending on how he performs this week, we'll see how that confidence stands. And I believe it was you who mentioned last week, he could go for like a Zoe Nami Elusives angle, but we don't think Majin is going to do that.
Yeah, I think that there definitely are options, especially because in Eternal, Elusives is very strong, right? The Brothers Bond is a very strong. The Taric spell is main deckable in Eternal. There's Elusives to be played. It's just very much not Majin style. Yeah. Majin hates that type of deck. But yeah, he could just play like Zoe Yumi at any point. But I just I just wonder if Majin would stoop that low to queuing up elusives.
Yeah, and that might be something that Shotox here might struggle with, facing down elusives. When you're going up against like Rise and elusives in the single lineup, like how does some roster of Shotoxes really deal with that? I'm also very curious to see if Majin will bring Ash off the bench and how he would even use that.
I feel like if he does play Ash, maybe it would just end up being like Spooky Ash with Thresh. Mm-hmm. Like that's probably the closest to a normal deck. But if you're playing Ash, maybe it is just for Freljord. Maybe he builds like a weird FTR deck. Just a ton of control. Maybe he builds like a Bodier deck. Bodier coming out, that card, as it turns out, pretty okay. So having access to the Freljord, maybe that gives him a little bit more flexibility. There's a lot of options available. I just worry that Majin isn't the most flexible person on the planet when it comes to his deck selection. So I'm a little bit concerned about where he'll end up.
Yeah, and of course, not being that flexible in deck selection puts like a big target on his head, makes it easier for other players to sort of counter him. And which you remember, some players had very strong lineups last season, but they got completely targeted and really struggled. It was like an uphill battle for some of them.
Yeah, especially for somebody like Majin, where you look at it and it's like, okay, so he's either going to bring Rise or Thresh Nasus. And if I'm good into both of those, I'm probably just going to have a good week against Majin. Yeah.
Yeah, so going into Shotox's roster. Shotox's roster, of course, has changed since the trade week. He ended up getting rid of Taric, probably because of the Cosmic Call nerfs. Didn't feel like he needed Targon access. Instead, picking up the Lissandra, giving himself access to Freljord, which he didn't have before. And there's like a lot of gives and takes you can talk about with this exact trade here, because a card like Lux, he has brought a couple times now, but only with Taric and doing like buff spell combo and then blowing people up. A cool thing that I think Shotox found out and a lot of viewers found out was that Taric doubling spells counts for Lux's mana thing, which I don't think he was aware of at first, but he was just like doubling down on Lux lasers just by playing like a single 3-mana spell on Taric, which was kind of cool. Doesn't have that option anymore. And I'm not sure outside of maybe like Lux Shen, if Lux is really going to have many places to play. Maybe he just plays it for like champion strength or some sort of Demacia rally in other decks. But otherwise, Lissandra is very interesting. What do you think about Lissandra?
Wait, he like doubles she gets the mana progress.
Yes, she does.
The spell getting doubled.
That is something that we have found out in some of Shotox's games. So if he played Prismatic Barrier on Taric, which is 3 mana, and then Taric plays Prismatic Barrier on who he's supporting, that counts as enough to level Lux, generate a laser, all that stuff.
Is that a bug?
That is, I don't know if that's been declared a bug, but that is something that has been happening in each one of his games.
That has to be a bug. There's because Seraphine doubling it or Karma doubling it doesn't count for Lux, right? Well, I guess Jace doubling it does.
It's an interesting concept. I'm not sure if.
Sorry, yeah, I
because it's not like I don't know the exact answer. It's definitely something I would want to get like a rioter here for like discussion. Spids is saying it's absolutely not a bug in chat. But like,
I assume it depends on what Lux's text is. Mm-hmm. Maybe Lux does work with Seraphine and I'm being silly.
It could be Lux text, or it could also be that like Taric playing the spell on another unit is different than just like doubling the spell.
Yeah.
Functionally.
Yeah. Interesting. Mm-hmm. Either way, yeah, we were talking last week about what Shotox could do with his lineup, and I felt like Taric was one of the better pieces of his lineup. I liked the fact that he had access to the infinite rallies. I liked the piles that he was putting together with it. I'm surprised that was the one that he decided to kick to the curb, but Lissandra, Bodier just came out, so Freljord's a little bit better. He does have access to like Elise, so maybe he's gonna play like Endure. Endure, very much a big deck on the Eternal Ladder at the moment. Yeah, I would not be surprised if that is the direction that he goes, especially with Cosmic Call getting nerfed, right? There's going to be a lot fewer hushes in the meta, which means that something like Endure might end up finding its target. He still has the Anti-Jin. He could just play normal Anti-Jin at some point. I don't think he has yet, but he could. He could. And then, I'm glad to see that he pulled out the pink Alawi, by the way.
Yeah.
We highlighted that as a potential, and I'm glad that he went for it.
And he found, even though he didn't win the best of 3 in total, that deck had complete success against Twisted Fate. Ezreal just kept trying to remove the tentacle, did not work, and just ended up slamming in for a bunch of damage, which I think is the exact goal of that deck. Lysandra could even go with Renekton if you really wanted to. Get like some Shurima Thrall sort of stuff. Definitely not as ideal as like Talia or something in that sort of deck. But if you just want some Shurima Thrall shenanigans, it is an option.
Yeah, if you're really looking for the Thralls, or even, again, with the least, you could go like the FTR angle. I think that it's been a while since people have been jamming FTR, but FTR is still very reasonable. It's one of the best control packages that you can end up going into in the game. And I think that'd be very reasonable as well. I'm concerned what he's going to do with Lux from here on out. You mentioned that, up to until this point, it had been like Tark shenanigans. And now I'm not sure where you end up and what you end up doing with this champion. She's not insanely flexible. She doesn't have like a really strong package. Lux is a very strong card, but usually needs a lot of help. And without Jace, it's a little bit sus.
You could potentially do like Lux Alawi to give yourself like the rallies for an Alawi, and then also there's like that 6 mana tentacle spell and stuff. There's options, I guess.
There's funny things, yeah. Yeah. I wonder, maybe after this week, maybe Shotox and Majin can get a trade going. Maybe they can figure something out, get a hold of that Jace and
honestly,
see what happens.
Honestly, Lux for Yuumi looks like it probably would benefit both players.
Ooh.
Like, I don't want to start like forging trade deals right now or like doing things for other players, but I feel like that would benefit both of them.
There's definitely potential there. Definitely potential.
So as far as this matchup and our predictions for what these players might bring, we already talked about how Majin might be kind of limited in what he brings, but Shotox definitely has a lot more options. But exactly how do you think, if you're Shotox, you target what you think Majin's going to bring?
Yeah, it's hard to say because something like Rise is not really going to... it's going to fold to Anti-Jin. Anti-Jin absolutely destroys Rise. And Endure probably does very well into Rise too. The question's going to be like, what's your third deck? What's something that can actually get in there and beat that? And it's really hard. Is it going to be the Alawi again? Alawi's not particularly great because usually you're going very tall with Alawi, and going tall against Rise isn't really the strategy.
Homecoming,
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
In Ionia they just have so many more stuns and bounces, and as far as like what your third deck ends up being, I think that would kind of be the big question mark. And maybe he's not able to find one, but I do like the core of like Anti-Jin plus Endure. I think that's like a really strong core from Shotox.
Yeah, I'm personally, I feel like Victor hasn't gotten as much time to shine yet in this series. He's brought Victor before, but he hasn't really gotten much of a spotlight yet. And I'm wondering if there is some sort of like P&Z aggressive, almost like burn deck that you could potentially pull off that might give Rise a run for its money. I don't know.
There's some Noxus Victor decks, like the Feint HD style, ballistic bot, ambush, do some shenanigans with that. That's always something that's like hanging in the back. You'd end up taking your Annie. So, you might have to find another deck then, but there's definitely potential there. Had we highlighted it last week, I feel like Vandal City would go really hard with his lineup, right? I feel like it opens up your Victor options. It opens up even your Lux options.
Jin.
Yeah, I feel like in Jin. It feels like Vandal would do really well. New message Shotox. Be like, bro, come on. Go pick up a Bandle champion.
I'm gonna be real with you right now. There is not a single Bandle champion left in the pool for free trades. He would have to trade with another player if he wants a
You're
Bandle
right
champion.
then. Yumi might be the option. Going after Yumi, trying to snipe it. Interesting stuff.
You know what I think would be a really good deck into Majin's lineup?
What's that?
Lux Tarek.
Ooh, yeah, yeah. No, I'm seeing it. I'm seeing the vision.
That would have been a something that would have been quite good if we still had that.
Was Tarek really low cost, maybe, or like was he? Was I guess what I'm asking is in his trade, was he close to like hitting the roof? So was he limited on what he could trade out of his lineup?
Well, Tarek wasn't like super low cost. I think he was around average. I think he was like a 10 cost, which is right there in the middle. But Shotox definitely did not have much of a budget remaining or like extra points to trade. So he sort of had what he worked with. Lysandra, I think, was a little bit cheaper than Tarek. So he could have gone potentially a little bit more expensive if he wanted. But I think that it screamed to me when he made this trade that he was going after the new Freljord dragon, the Thrall's dragon.
Yeah, I do think access to Freljord does a lot for him. Like I very much like picking up Freljord. I just feel like Tarek was so good.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to see if he completely proves us wrong. We already talked a little bit about the limitations of Majin's lineup, but he still might be a challenge for Shotox to overcome. Who do you feel has the advantage in this matchup if we're just like looking at rosters here?
Just looking at rosters, I feel like it's Shotox. I really like his core here. I really like the Lysandra pickup. I think access to Freljord does a lot for his lineup. And Majin's lineup, I think, is just a little bit scatterbrained at the moment, you know? If Majin's able to end up finding a good set of decks and a good direction to go, then, you know, he might be able to pull this out, right? Like, you can never put it past Majin. Majin's very, very good. And it's very creative. But yeah, it's just hard for me when I look at Majin's lineup to come up with, like, what a Majin lineup looks like. And yeah, I think I lean towards Shotox. There's a much clearer vision for me of like what him winning looks like.
Understandable. And I think I will have to agree with you on this one. Shotox is definitely, while he did lose last season, I think he's definitely shown that he can be quite creative, both in his like lines and play, as well as his deck building and utilization of his roster. And I think that is just enough of an advantage to give himself an edge over Majin here. I think it's definitely leaning in Shotox's favor here.
I think I know. His third deck could just be Renekton Lux. You just run like Cataclysm Renekton. That might be it. That might be it.
That could be it. We will have to see. We're going to go into our second matchup here, which is Cephalopod's Fospero FC versus the Empire's Gladiators with Sir Turman. Both of these guys coming off of a win last week. Cephalopod not engaging in any sort of trades at all this week. He's very much said that he's quite happy with how his roster turned out. And if you think about the nerfs that occurred to like the big meta stuff that happened, whether it be like Cosmic Call, concurrent timelines, or stuff like that, doesn't really impact him as heavily. He had those options in the back, but like I don't think that he completely suffers from the Cosmic Call nerf as much as Sir Turman with his 3 Targon Champions triple Cosmic Call lineups did, when he did trade away his Diana for Volibear because of those nerfs, I believe.
Yeah, no, it's pretty funny. I was talking about watching Cephalopod's recap, and he said just run as much Cosmic Call as possible. And Termid was listening to that. Termid was running as much Cosmic Call as possible. And with Cosmic Call eating a nerf, it's a little bit harder. I do like the Volibear pickup. Again, I think Freljord is really strong. I think that giving access to that is really good. Whether that ends up being, like an Endure type of deck, whether that ends up being, a Bodhi or Abuse deck, whether it's just big control. I like having access to it. I think that's good for Tournament's lineup.
And Tournament did again last week bring the Twisted Fate Ezreal PNZ combo, showing what I believe everyone is now quite familiar with. Twisted Fate plus Sunken Temple. It's pretty good, leveling TF pretty quickly, but it was one of the first times that we had seen it before the Eternal patch had hit. And it can really pop off, even with just Ezreal instead of what your other PNZ champion ideally would be. I'm also very interested in potentially this Vladimir, who has not yet left the bench this season. However, I think that Vladimir is a little underrated, especially after his recent change. I've played around with him a little bit. I think that it's actually quite... I wouldn't say like OP or like super strong or anything, but it's better than I think other people give it credit for. And I think having Freljord access now too gives you a few other options.
Yeah. One thing I'd like to see is I actually ran into somebody on ladder who was running Demacia with Vladimir. The idea being that they just play the Crimson Banquet Hall, which is the landmark that discounts all your guys. And then they just shit out a bunch of different elites and it basically discount their entire deck. And then Vladimir's just like a big tri-beam in that deck. You play him on turn 4 and you just absolutely destroy your opponent's board. I think that'd be an interesting direction. I don't know how much that's going to spread. I don't know how good that actually is, but I just got blown out on ladder by it. So, it's fresh in my mind.
Yeah, no, that does sound pretty spicy. And unfortunately, Sir Termin not with access to Demacia.
Yeah, no Demacia. What a failing.
Yeah.
Not building the Vladimir Demacia lineup.
Why didn't you build your lineup around that? One of the weaknesses, we've talked about this before with Sir Termin, but it's still something that exists, is no Ionia, no Shurima. Cephalopod can pretty much say, hey, there's no counter spells coming at whatever I throw at you, unless he's like playing Vhagar specifically for Signposts, which is sort of like a soft counter spell, really. So that is definitely something that you can abuse if you are Cephalopod. Be like, hey, I know you're not going to be playing Deny here, so I can play my Vengeances, or I can play my like big AoE clears, or like my Homecomings aren't going to get denied or anything. And I think Homecoming or like recalls in general probably pretty good into a lot of what Termin is running here.
Yeah, I'm looking at Termin's lineup. It's very funny. If you're Cephalopod, you're pretty happy because Termin lost Cosmic Call. He lost like the strongest thing that he was doing. But then you think about it, it's like, oh, but he's brought Cosmic Call every single week, and I just lost something I knew he would have been bringing. So it's a little bit more up in the air in terms of actually preparing for Tournament. The only thing that's face up would be, like Ezreal TF, which, to be fair, I think Cephalopod probably has the tools to be able to build something that's pretty good into that.
Absolutely.
But it's interesting how it is kind of rough for Cephalopod that, there's so much obscured here in terms of what Tournament's going to end up bringing.
Yeah, I do think that if you are Cephalopod, you have to either say, I'm going to be prepared to ban Twisted Fate Ezreal, or I have to bring a deck that can kill Twisted Fate and like Sunken Temple pretty easily. Otherwise, You're definitely, I don't want to say trolling, but like kind of trolling.
The deck is definitely very good, and it's very close to, like a constructed level deck, right? In terms of, what we would bring to a tournament, where we got to put any champions in our deck. The Ezreal TF is very good. That said, Cephalopod definitely has tools to be able to beat that. Vayne anything should be very good into it. Whether that's Vayne Rumble, whether that's Vayne Ornn, just Vayne anything is very good into it. After that, it's a little bit harder. Echo historically is very bad into Piltover and Zon. PNZ just has very good, efficient ways of dealing with Echo. It's a little bit dubious to be bringing that unless you're planning on banning Ezreal TF. Yeah. The other thing is it's Cephalopod. Cephalopod is much more interested in cooking than playing necessarily just good decks. And the cooking, went well last week. It's went well a couple weeks in a row, actually, because he cooked a lot against Majin as well, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And then versus Slay ended up 2-0ing him last week. Seraphine didn't stand a chance. Have you seen that game? Because that game was like pretty insane. He ended up leveling Jack on turn 5 with Scout. It was actually kind of nuts.
Yeah, that Jack unit is pretty okay. Pretty okay. Yeah. No, Jack set. It's funny because it's a deck that's like basically exactly the same as in standard. Maybe there's like a few different cards in there. But seeing him be able to bring it and do so well with it is just it's very funny.
Yeah, I do think I remember saying this with L games last week, but I do think that Sir Turman's lineup is deceptively flexible. I think that there's other options that we haven't seen yet. Like when we've seen Evelyn played, it's been normally with Maokai, but I think you could definitely do like the Evelyn Kale route as well, and get like some big Zolanis. It's not like the glory days of 4-mana Siren Song, but it could still get some work done. I think Vladimir Volibear definitely has potential. You have a lot of units that very much might want to have a lot of health and or take damage, and Vladimir helps you level your Volibear, helps push you in that direction, which could show potential. Also, if you're not going to do TF Ezreal, which like you probably are, I myself have gotten my ass kicked by Volibear PNZ with the 6-mana unit that doubles elemental spells and skills. And just turns,
Yasilla.
Yeah, turns Sky Splitter into like +2/+6 for 2 mana, and just like you can't kill anything.
Pretty solid. I do like, again, I like the Volibear pickup, and having access to Freljord and Shadow Isles and even PNZ, these are like really flexible regions that have so many different playstyles and so many different things that you can go for. That I definitely like that. I do think it's interesting. Shodox brought a mill deck last week. Turmund also brought a mill deck, which in the Evelyn Maokai. Is mill secretly just the OP strat? I think they both ate bans on it.
They both ate bans. It was really funny because it was like definitely a mill. Excuse me. It was definitely like a deck that Shodox crafted to be like, hey, I'm going to target your mill deck. You're going to toss all your cards, and I'm going to make you draw cards and stuff like that. But they ended up both banning it anyways. I think Shodox said he banned it because he assumed his mill deck was going to be banned. But it was some really funny, like sort of mirror matchy sort of stuff that ended up taking place. But yeah, mill. That is, I guess, the weakness of Maokai, because like, yes, he's milling you, but he's also milling himself, and you can potentially take advantage of this.
It is pretty funny, yeah. The double-edged sword of Maokai mill.
Yeah, and I guess that also begs the question of if you ever bring Vhagar instead of Maokai if you want access to Shadow Isles.
Yeah, I imagine it just kind of depends on what type of a deck you're building. But yeah, I think that could be really fair. If you want to go a control route, then like Vhagar Volibear, maybe that ends up coming out. Lots of options available. Turman's lineup, I like a lot of the champions in his lineup. I like a lot of what he has going on. It's very cool.
Yeah, hold on a second, because before we talk about like who we expect to win or anything like that, I think we're going to get Cephalopod in call for a second to see what he thinks about this matchup. So I don't want to just end this just yet. Oh, hello.
Hello.
Welcome, sir. Welcome. We wanted to get your thoughts. Of course, we don't want to like spoil anything, give away any of your tactics for taking down Sir Turmund here. But we wanted to get your thoughts as the player and coach of Foxborough FC of this matchup.
Yeah, I mean, my main thought is thank the Lord above that Cosmic Call got nerfed before I had to play for a tournament. That would have been a massacre, but I mean, it's kind of hard to predict what he'll do because he hasn't really had to show any strats outside of Cosmic Call, so it's all new this week.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely a lot up there in the air. You can definitely still see like different lines that he could take. We've been theorizing, but there's no way of guaranteeing what he's going to bring. So do you think that that surprise factor is like a big threat to you? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, there's a lot of like for volley specifically, there's a lot of different things you can do. You can do like Battle Fury, you can do like ramp into the Bodier guy. You can do like, you know, any number of things with it. But honestly, if I had to make a call out on the pre-show of what he's going to bring, it would be a Fellows Volley Ramp, Ezreal TF Temple, and Vagar Battle Tree of some variety.
Vagar Battle Tree. Oh,
holy shit. Battle Tree?
That would, are you thinking like with Evelyn Husks? Is that what you're saying?
Maybe.
Or like Noxus.
Or some kind of actually Endure might be more likely than Ramp now that I'm looking at it more, but I don't know, it's hard to predict.
Endure is definitely something he just has in the back pocket. The Freljord gives him a lot of flexibility. Are you just gonna all in on targeting Sunken Temple? Are you just gonna make sure that no Sunken Temple sits on your board?
I mean, I think I've brought triple or like 8 or 9 Explorer every week, except for the first week, which I lost. So maybe it's working out for me so far.
That might be the strat then.
Yeah, don't bring Temple because I'll be on 18 Explorers. Wink, wink.
There we go. Well, thank you for giving us your input into your match. We wish you the best of luck with both preparation and your games, and definitely, if I haven't said it before, that Jack play last week, that was something else.
It was fun. All right, thanks for getting me on for the quick cameo.
No, we love doing this kind of stuff. We love getting the players' thoughts on these sort of things.
Awesome. Have a good rest of the show.
You too. I've already messed it up. Okay, so anyways, now that Cephalopod's gone and we can totally dunk on his roster, who do you think is going to come out on top here, Aikado?
You know, I like a lot of the power of what Turmund has going for him. I really like the Volibear pickup. I'm going to lean towards Turmund, but the thing is, Cephalopod's such a wild card. Cephalopod, you know, with infinite time to cook, will usually find something. So I think it's going to be close, but I'm leaning towards Turmund.
Gotcha. You know, I was going to lean towards Cephalopod, but after he's talked a little bit about how concerned he is about like all these wild cards that Turmund could be throwing, and I'm not just talking about all of TF's wild cards. Ha ha ha. It's definitely something that I think is going to be interesting, and it's possible that Ceph might just cook a little too hard. We'll have to see. Just like overthinking things.
Yeah, you're saying that you've lost confidence after him giving his interview. You've lost confidence.
Absolutely, that is exactly what I am saying.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All that we know is that he's definitely bringing 9 Explorers, which is
absolutely,
you know, OP.
100%. Moving on to our next matchup, we have Dizzymondo ORNG versus the Windswept Warriors. This is probably the matchup this week that I'm most excited for. And I want to get into that for a second. Before we do, let's talk a little bit about one of the trades that occurred. And that is Azir into L Games roster. He got rid of Tryndamere. He added Azir. And that one champion, I think, does so much for L Games roster. I know everyone's thinking like Azir Aurelia because they're like right next to each other, but I think Azir actually can fit into a lot of different options in this lineup and really rounds it out.
Azir could be a pretty flexible champion. I'm not gonna lie, I'm also looking at Azir Aurelia and I'm like, damn, that Desert Wrath card just got buffed. Azir's gotten multiple buffs ever since rotation. Like, I think that deck is really scary. And if you aren't bringing a lineup that like can deal with it, which isn't necessarily easy, especially with what Jason has available. Azir Aurelia can absolutely, run it down on you.
Oh, absolutely. I do not doubt that at all. But the reason that I'm so excited for this match is because these two players have both adapted to this series and this like format in very like different but interesting ways. We have over the several weeks now sort of talked about how L Games had previously a very not so flexible roster. He had like 4 Freljord champions, like 3 Shadow Isles champions, not too much region access. His region access has shifted a little bit since then to be a little bit more inclusive, but still is missing out on a good number of tools. That being said, he is like archetypally brought like a variety of different things over the course of this series. He went from like aggro burn to like mid-range control, and against Spids last week he brought like 3 fearsome like Mist Wraith Allegiance decks utilizing his Shadow Isles roster, and now he could, if he wanted to, do like a free attack deck with like a Azir Aurelia and like ephemerals and probably something with like Darius or anything. Like he can like just absolutely swarm you, or he could do something that he's done before. I think that while he's missing out on a lot of tools, he has a lot of things, a lot of different ways to attack you. On the flip side, Jason has brought like very similar decks every week. He's brought Katarina Yasuo, Udyr Galio,
Yasuo Katarina, yeah.
And then like a Janna deck. Janna deck was different last week, and we'll talk about that in a second. But he has been very good at like teching his decks into his opponent with like very few switches. And if you watched his game versus Roji last week, which I believe he just put the video up on his channel now, he was very much rewarded for those tech choices. So I'm very interesting to see these guys clash. What do you think?
Yeah, I do like that L Games has the triple SI and showed the Mist Rays, because Mist Rays is a very hard deck to prepare for. It's a very easy like lineup to just end up very soft into. So the fact that he's shown that already makes everyone who has to play against them for the rest of the tournament just have to be cognizant of that. Yeah, that said, I like a lot of what Jason has, and especially with Katarina. He's only played Katarina Yasuo, and like it's Jason. He might just jam Katarina Yasuo again, even though there isn't really like the what I would say traditional mid-range style of deck coming out of L Games that Katarina Yasuo kind of stunts on. But I'd like Katarina in like more of a control-y sense. Maybe like Katarina Janna ends up seeing play. That type of Noxus PNZ control is really good against like a Azir Aurelia, which I think would be interesting. But yeah, maybe this is the week where he'll have to actually, swap things out a little bit, not just bring the same decks.
Yeah, I personally, I feel like this is a week where like several champions like Karma or no, actually, he has brought in Fizz, but like come off the bench and sort of like see some play. I feel like instinctively against a lot of what L Games has brought beforehand, you want like AoE removal, you want like pings, you want like, I don't know, like Withering Wail or Rocket Barrage or stuff like that to potential, maybe not Rocket Barrage because that doesn't really help you against all these free attacks, but I feel like you want tools to help you deal with a lot of these free attacks that might be coming from Azir Aurelia, from ephemerals, from like, I don't know, just killing a Teemo or something.
Yeah. And Jason is almost, I'm not going to say locked in, but it's very hard for Jason to bring a lineup that doesn't bring Ionia. And those Ionia style of decks, oftentimes they're having a lot of trouble into like Zed Hecarim, into like Azir Aurelia, into like these type of anti-control, beatdown decks that are able to apply so much pressure. I wonder if there's like, a Zed Hecarim, Azir Aurelia, Teemo Shadow Isles burn deck Maybe a lineup like that just kind of is very hard for Jason to end up preparing for. I like a lot of his champions. I like a lot of what he has going on. I think he needs access more of these like control style regions, whether that's PNZ, whether that's Noxus. I feel like he needs a little bit more. He just doesn't have like the redundancy that lets him build, the types of lineups that I would like to look at.
Okay. That being said, seeing as we are locked into his champions for this week, what do you think that he does to help prepare for this? You mentioned Janna, Katarina control, but what else do you think he has in his tool belt? Cephalopod seems confident that Jason can win these.
I mean, he definitely can. He has a lot of flexibility in his options, right? I think the question is just sort of, is he willing to bring Katarina as like a control tool? Maybe he brings like Janna Fizz again, and then maybe it's like Katarina Nocturne, some sort of like a Noxus SI control. I think that he's just gonna have a little bit of trouble. Formidables, how's Formidables doing to Zeri Relia? That seems like a really bad matchup.
It feels like a really bad matchup, but I honestly do not have the experience to tell you.
Formidables also can't beat Mysteries. Oh shit. Okay, we can't bring Formidables.
No, I think that this is definitely like a week where you say, oh my god, if you do like any research at all, and see the decks that he brought last week, you're suddenly like, I could get really punished for this, because that Galio sitting right there on his lineup roster can be all that L Games needs to be like, okay, I'm going to bring more Fearsomes again.
Yeah, Fearsomes, you could just pull the trigger if you wanted to. It's not easy for Jason to like really be good into them. Maybe there's like a Nico deck or something. Maybe Nico Udyr. Maybe we find a deck in there. There's potential. I think. Is Bodier in Nico's region? No, it's a dragon, right?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
Small Penguin says that Jason is his favorite to win the CDS, but specifically because of his RNG play last week against Roji, which was something.
Yeah.
Have you seen the Twitter clip going around that he shared about him like using the unyielding skip against Roji?
Yeah, the skip stealing a card and then becoming literally unkillable. That was
that was something else, and we're probably going to see more from him. So I understand where Small Penguin's coming from, but this is looking like it might be a pretty hard one for him.
Yeah, I think the L Games is just really hard to prepare for. Because especially since L Games also has shown the control side, right? Has a lot of options available there as well. It's shown a willingness to go almost any direction with their lineup, and very much play these champions just for regions. It's a very hard lineup to prepare for. But Jason did a lot of prep last week, and ended up paying off. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's able to find the line. Just looking at it, it's hard for me to see what the line is. But it's probably there. There's a lot of flexibility.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. Even though L Games is currently at a lower record than Jason, he definitely feels like the player that has done the best at utilizing a limitation of 10 champions. Even though he has been trading a lot, he has been able to utilize his roster to the fullest, I would say. And that's something that, even though he is not currently in the lead, I don't think should be dismissed.
Yeah, definitely the case.
So that being said, who are you leaning towards as having an advantage for this week?
I think I gotta give advantage to L Games. I feel like the mind games are just very strong, and it makes it really hard to prepare for. If Jason's able to find it, and able to find a lineup that he feels comfortable on, then he definitely can have a way through here. But I feel like L Games just has so much going for them that I would give them the edge.
All right. I find myself this week, well, we disagreed a bunch last week. I find myself almost in complete agreement with you for these. I'm definitely afraid of L Game's roster going into this for Jason. So we'll have to see how he decides to fight back. Moving on to our fourth match of this week, the Bandle City Buster Shots versus Los Charlanga Slay. Both of these players really fighting for a win, which sounds dumb because it's a tournament, everyone's fighting for wins, but these players are both on the lower side of the bracket right now. If Slay loses this, I don't think it's impossible for him to make top cut still, but I think if he loses this week, it's probably going to be really impossible for him to make top 2, or at least incredibly challenging. And top 2, of course, is something that you want to fight for because that gives you a pass into semis and a guaranteed slice of the prize pool. So you definitely want that if you can get it. Bust, on the other hand, isn't looking as bad, but is still going to be much of an uphill battle if he can't bring himself around to a win on this match. So there's a lot on the line here. And
it's rough for BC Buster Shots because their main win condition got Buster Shot, and it's no longer playable.
Oh,
go ahead.
I was going to say, Slay has been playing Cosmic Call every week.
True. So, the Shyvana Asol, maybe no longer going to be able to carry. I think it's gotten banned, right? The last couple weeks.
It has gotten banned most of the time, yeah.
Yeah. I feel like the last week we talked about Slay's lineup and how it had a lot of trouble with flexibility. Stuff like Kane Aatrox kind of can only pair together. So I'd concerned about that. But yeah, there's options available for them.
Busted engaged in a few trades last week about he got rid of a lot of his PNZ champions. He used to have 3, if you remember, but like you were saying about timelines, he ended up getting rid of Caitlyn and Vi to acquire Jarvan and LeBlanc, which didn't give him any new region access, but did give him a way to double down on both Demacia and Noxus, which definitely could help in his roster here.
Yeah, definitely. And Jarvan's a really strong champion. I like having access to that, especially since Bust the last couple of weeks has brought the elites pile. So, maybe wanting to have access to potentially like double elites. Also, picking up another Noxus, because if I remember correctly, they picked up Samira last week.
Yes.
Right? So maybe wanting more access to Noxus for Jinx, I'm not sure who else is, necessarily benefiting from that, but there's definitely options available. Options abound.
One thing that I want to say about Slay has had a pretty hard time with Kane Aatrox this season. It's the first 2 weeks it was basically abused. This last week he did not bring it. He brought a Riven Viego deck instead of Kane Aatrox. And I want to say that even though Kane Aatrox is limiting and like very abusable, I feel like it looks pretty good into Bust's roster currently.
Kane Aatrox usually is good into a lot of other mid-range decks that are maybe slightly smaller than it. Kane can really get out of control fast if you don't have reasonable ways to deal with him. It's definitely it's such a weird deck. But you're right in that like Bust has a lot of like really small champions, looking at like 2 and 3 cost champions that don't necessarily get super big. There's a lot of Bandle City. I could definitely see a world where I think it's a good call out. I think it's a really good call out that, maybe Kane Aatrox, maybe this is the week.
This is its redemption arc. Sorry.
Maybe it's like Kane Aatrox. Maybe just go like big mid range. Maybe that's like the theme of this week. You go Kane Aatrox, you go dragons, but you play actual dragons, and then you just play like Viego Nora, and you just try and get like the biggest boys possible, and just try and stonewall them on board.
I could definitely see that working out for him. As far as Bust's concerned, do you think that him making up for the timeline nerfs, do you think that he has a shot with like some of these changes that are happening, or do you think that that was like a very harsh blow to him?
I think it's a massive blow, because obviously their lineup in previous weeks had been very much built around how do you get as many reasonable timelines decks into a lineup as possible. That said, they've already shown flexibility with Jax. Jax isn't just a timelines unit. Played Jax Trundle previously. There's a. Did you see the Rico deck? It's like Jax Ornn, but without Ornn. It's just Jax Freljord, and it's just like Battle Fury. Basically picture Jax Ornn, but instead of running a bunch of the weapon synergies, you're just running like Bone Club and Battle Fury and triple Sharesies. It's Rico-fied.
Yeah.
That type of a deck could be potentially pretty good for Bust here. Bust still has the Jinx. You can go the discard aggro. Aggro is very good in Eternal. PNZ Nox is definitely an option. There's definitely there's options available. Is he allowed to play timelines, by the way?
Because of the nerf, that is not the nerf, the bug. That is something that we have been looking into. If it doesn't get changed soon, it might end up being banned for the week. There's another bug that we're watching as well with a tune giving you more than one mana, but that's going to be less of a. If that ends up being an issue, that's going to be less of a. You aren't allowed to bring all attune cards, and more of like, just don't abuse this sort of thing.
How does that work?
So what I've been told is, and I haven't seen it in game myself, but the way it's been explained to me is, if you have a full board and one of the units on that board is a husk, and you play an attune unit, when it's killing the husk, attunes, and then when it lands on the board, it attunes. So you get extra spell mana. And instead of being like, okay, for this week we are banning all attune cards and all husk cards, it is probably just going to be something where we're going to be like, hey, don't abuse this. But as far as timelines is concerned, that is probably something that very well might get banned if it doesn't get hot fixed in like the next day or so.
Yeah, it's a wild thing where timelines right now you're getting the play effect of the unit that you play down and the unit that you transform into. It's a little weird. But Bust has a lot of options. Lulu Poppy is always on the table. Tristana. Do we have access to SI? We don't have SI. SI Tristana is usually the best one in Eternal because you get access to Atrocity. And is very good at grinding out mid-range style decks. So, might have been a direction that Bust could have gone. But yeah, I could definitely see, some sort of like a Jax Trundle, Samira Jinx, Lulu Poppy, maybe some sort of a lineup like that. You can even go just Lulu Jinx. But yeah, there's a lot of options available. I do feel like it's going to be pretty aggressively focused. So maybe Slay can keep that in mind. It can prepare with that in mind, trying to beat a more aggressive low to the ground style of a lineup from Bust.
Yeah. I personally think that like if I were just looking at rosters, I would say that I think Slay has the advantage here, but Slay has shown to sort of like struggle to adapt into their opponents' rosters in the past. And so I'm actually leaning a bit towards Bust. I think he's going to come out with a few surprises for us this week.
I think that's super fair. But, given the massive nerf to the win conditions that Bust had going on, in Slay, this might be their week where they're able to pull it together and really, end up finding the target, finding the favorable matchups. They have some flexibility. There's lines here that give them favor. I think I'm going to Slay.
Well, I'm glad we could disagree about at least one thing here. All right, it is time for the final match of the week to talk about. It is the redeemed qualities versus the extrusive elementals, Spids versus Roji. I have my thoughts about this matchup, but I want to give it to you first.
Spids versus Roji. So are these the only players that didn't make any trades? Well, I guess Majin didn't either.
There are other players that didn't make any trades, but I think this is the only match where both players didn't make any trades.
There we go. That's the headline. Both of these players were happy with their lineups. I do think, when you think about classic Roji exists to play the biggest mid-range possible and just outmuscle other people, right? And Spids' lineups oftentimes are just like these, slight piley type of like mid-range thrown together. And even you could see from Spids literally first picked Gwen again, and it's just like this mid-rangey style of that Spids is very used to and very good at. It does feel like Roji, if he does decide to bring the out muscle on board style of decks, definitely has an obvious direction to go here.
Yeah, I feel like if I'm Roji, of course, has sort of like struggled this season. He definitely has a lot of decks that are like his decks and he's like really comfortable with, but he has had such a big target on his back in this competition, with people just like sort of being like, okay, I know exactly pretty much what Roji's going to bring and we're going to target the hell out of this. The one week that he won was the week that he used Malphite and Pantheon as just like cosmic call engines, and that's a lot harder to do now. That being said, if I'm Roji going into this week, I feel like this is the matchup that I'm looking for. I feel like this is the lineup that I want to see if I'm Roji, because this is sort of, as you said, mid-range, but not as big as I am.
Yeah, I think the concern is, though, that oftentimes the best way to if you have an idea in your head of what Spids brings and it's like all this mid-range stuff, the best way to abuse that is if you have a very flexible lineup that hasn't necessarily showed a bunch of anti mid-range. I think last CDS when I played against Spids, I hadn't showed a lot of anti mid-range, but in season, I just swapped hard on her, and I think I was able to find a pretty good angle. I think she high rolled the shit out of me and won anyway, but that's beside the point. But no, I think that, if it's very face up, Spids is definitely willing to cook and has options available to, potentially punish you for all inning on it. But I mean, if you're Roji, do you have another option? It's hard to say.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have too many options if you're Roji. I feel like
your pivot of Cosmic Call just isn't around anymore, right?
Yeah. I feel like if I'm Roji, though, even though Spids has been known to be pretty adaptable in utilizing their roster, I feel like if I'm Roji, I look at Spids' lineup and I look at my lineup and I say, okay, they're probably bringing Plunder, they're probably bringing something with Leona and a third deck. And that sounds pretty reasonable, right? Like those seem like decks that could actually have something against Roji's lineup.
Yeah, Plunder gets to abuse Spirits Unleashed. That card is really, really insane. Leona's units get massive. Yeah, and even Poro King. Poro King's kind of an annoying deck to play against, just because it spits out a bunch of different, 3/3s, 1-mana 3/3s over and over and over and over and over. I don't know if that necessarily can stop Varus or Malphite from going over you, but it's definitely a concern. I'm trying to think of what the side angle from Spiz would be to go around the
Shellfolk?
Around the lineup from Roji. Yeah, it might be Shellfolk. It might be the return of Ken and Kaisa.
That didn't get a chance last time, got immediately banned. But I feel
you
like
could also go just oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. No, you could probably go just full aggro.
Interesting.
Do you remember the Gwen Fizz deck?
I do, yes.
You could go Neela Gwen, Draven. We don't have access to PNZ. Is it Draven Leona? You play some Mites, you play some Fervors, and then I don't know what the third deck is.
Something
Maybe
with
it's
Lucian?
just. Oh, you could go Draven Gangplank and just play Pirates.
Oh.
Okay. And then what's your third deck to make Roji cry?
Something with Lucian?
Maybe.
Lucian Cannon. champion strike.
You
or
lost
something.
CS, so like CS is kind of like the cheesiest thing that you could do there. We need like one more Noxus or one more PNZ. We're just missing it.
Cephalopod says Draven, Gangplank, Gwen, Nyla, and then Sej Kennen would be a vibe.
Sej Kennen.
I'm
I
assuming
don't know what
that's
Sej Kennen
Bandle, not Ionia.
ends up. Yeah, I assumed Bandle. You could go like, because Sejuani's had a lot of like these like ping style decks before, where you just try and like freeze lock your opponent, right?
Yeah.
And maybe that's the direction you end up going.
I think Sejuani is definitely coming here in some way, shape, or form. I feel
Yeah, Plunder. I like, even if it's just Plunder, like Plunder's really good, right? It's definitely interesting.
I want to ask about this Gwen Nyla deck that we're talking about here, because you referenced the old like Hallowed Fizz deck, and like I remember piloting that poorly and still getting wins. I remember people gaming on me with that deck, but Fizz has elusive and can get like the easy rallies with the 3-drop, while Nyla is like quasi elusive, and that elusive in Brash is probably not very good into a lot of Roji's big meaty boys.
Yeah, I think that the replacement for Fizz is probably just what's the Bilgewater 1/1 fearsome elusive card?
Oh, that would be spicy. I know what you're talking about. Cutthroat, something Cutthroat?
Yeah. You just run that. You could also run like Vic Rash in this deck as like an alternate like elusive target. Yeah, it would definitely be. It's an interesting thing. You know, I would suggest testing it. You know, if Spiz is listening, you know, don't just jam that shit. But I'm pretty sure that Spiz like has played Gwen Fizz before.
Oh yeah. I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's definitely an option. The question is, you know, is Roji going to be able to deal with it? I think that really is sort of the story of this week, is going to be that Roji has one line of Pika Brig. You can change the particulars, you can change the specific decks, but they're all the same lineup. That's all just like this big boy mid range, bigger than you. And the question is like, is Spiz going to be able to find like the right angle on it to be favored into it? No, you know, I think it's definitely possible. I think there's definitely the tools available here for Spiz, but you know, maybe a lot of Spiz's stuff just ends up being mid range too.
Yeah,
so it's hard.
I think that she, pun intended, has a big mountain to climb here in this matchup.
True.
But definitely has possibilities of finding a win here. But it
like might just be Plunder. Plunder's like really good. It burns people out. You can still Sedge lock. Like a lot of mid-range decks have trouble into Plunder. It's a pretty fair way to approach it. Which, you know, I don't know if fair is how you want to play into Roji's decks.
Sure. I'm seeing a lot of...
Does Roji have flexibility?
I mean, you could do like a Ziggs Zareth sort of thing.
Yeah, I like the idea of Ziggs Zareth. He brought it last week, right?
Yeah, I don't think it got a chance to play, even though it wasn't banned, just because Jason 2-0'd him.
Yeah.
But he did.
I think Ziggs Zareth is like a reasonable approach, but after that, like, you're just so limited. And you don't even have like the control regions available to you, right? Your controlliest region is Targon, and you lost your Targon control option, or like Bandle, but you only have one Bandle card.
Yeah, I'm seeing people in chat, specifically Ginger Lemon, mentioning like hallowed elusives as an option for Spitz. Or maybe you're going
I
like
think that would be similar to the direction you go with the Neela, but you know, maybe you could do it with like Cannon. You know, you run like Bandle Commando and maybe even Ionia has a ton of elusives, huh?
Yeah.
Maybe.
There's a lot of different options there. I do like the Bandle Commando idea though, because that also gives you like chump blockers for a lot of these units that Roji's going to be sending in.
Yeah, it'd be nice if we had access to like Nora. Nora would be crazy here. But yeah, Vandal Commando. Are there any other elusives?
You could go
In Vandal?
Targon. Oh, sorry, in Vandal. There's the one that generates the pranks, the Mirai.
Oh, true. Kelp Maiden.
In Kelp Maiden, yeah.
Okay. Okay. There's definitely options.
Mm-hmm.
You could also just go Shellfolk. I mean, just Shellfolk on them.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, can Roji beat? He like maybe can. Like his good hands can beat Shellfolk, but Shellfolk definitely goes off early enough that I could see Roji just like not having a fun time against it.
I'm going to be honest. After his game against Jason Shellfolk last week, I think if Roji sees a Shellfolk deck this week, he's just banning it before like it even locks in.
Yeah.
I think it's just being insta-banned.
Jason's deck was so... He DM'd me and he's like, I'm thinking about bringing Glorious Shellfolk. Can you look at this? And I was like, bro, I love Glorious Shellfolk. I'll tell you. I'm glad it worked well for him.
He didn't even draw a Glorious Evolution. Just that unyielding skip did it all.
Yeah, we didn't write that one up. We didn't plan that one out on the old drawing board. But if it's offered to you, you can't say no, right?
Absolutely. All right. Yeah. So it sounds, well, actually, I'm not sure what it sounds like because we've spent most of this time talking about like how Spids can potentially overcome this hurdle. But I think the fact that we're suggesting this is a hurdle to begin with means that we're both sort of like leaning towards Roji in this matchup. Am I wrong?
I feel like if you just looked at lineups, Roji, and they just both bring reasonable decks, I think Roji's favored, right? Mm-hmm. Roji definitely has the tools available. The question just is, how flexible is Spiz going to be able to be? What is Spiz going to be able to do about it? And is she going to be able to find that angle? And Spiz, if nothing else, flexibility is absolutely her name. She does a great job of being flexible and of changing up her lineup based on the matchups expected. And, I think that Roji has a very powerful thing that he's doing. It's an unstoppable force, joke intended. But the question is Spid's going to be able to find a way around it, going to be able to find a way to deal with it, right?
Yeah, that's definitely going to be a match for all the viewers to be excited for. Me personally, this match between L Games and Jason is probably going to be my favorite, but this is a close second.
Yeah, there's some bangers. There's definitely some bangers. Gosh, I want to like Roji's lineup, but God, he has zero flexibility, truly.
It's something that he's definitely been paying for this season. He is currently in 9th place, by the way. He is only above Slay, who has yet to win a match.
It is funny. We talked about how in the draft, after the draft, Roji almost certainly was like, I got every champion I wanted, which sometimes isn't good. Sometimes having different flavors of the same deck makes it easier to prepare against you, especially in this type of a format. Maybe Roji, does he have like all of his trades available?
Oh yeah. Like he can trade with other players, or he can, he still has all of his free trades available as well. So like he can go off if he wants to, but I guess what do you trade? I'm looking mostly at the Bard, but it's like,
yeah, Bard is useless, but I don't know if we're able to just keep what I would like. Okay, the perfect world for Roji is a world where he keeps some of his options available, where it's like I can still run a Roji lineup, but I have this thing on the side, and whether that's, something slightly silly. He doesn't have Freljord. Why doesn't he have Freljord? Whether it's something silly like, like an Endure pull or like, I don't know, just something. He needs something that you have to worry about. Maybe I'll brainstorm it and try and come up with like, these are what you should be trading for, Roji. Here, find a lineup. We'll figure out a way to make this work, because right now it's just not quite there. Yeah.
Well, we're still only about a third of the way through the season. Getting close to a half though. So there's still plenty of time for adjustments and for players to adapt, and for players who might be at the bottom of the leaderboard right now to end up popping their way up to the top. But I think that about wraps it up for our little pregame show here. This is also like technically a Q&A, so if anyone wants to like throw any like CDS questions this way or anything, happy to utilize this live stream as a way to be like a little bit transparent with things, but also there will be more of these, so you can remember that in the future as well.
Whose lineup do you like the most? Just like as a player, like if you were to be in the CDS and you could just go into anybody's lineup, and you are now that player, not necessarily bringing over the record, but whose lineup would you like the most?
Just like me personally as a player, it would either be Shodox or L Games. Mm-hmm. Just personally. Just because of like my play style, and I like to get champions that I think I can utilize in different but deceptive ways. I think if I was in the Champion Draft series, I would be playing in a very similar way to L Games, where I would like deceive my opponents into thinking that I only have like one or two options, and in fact I actually have a like grand idea of different ways to play. But I also think that the Canadian Chimes Times roster is one of my favorites. And
it's very good. Mm-hmm. I do like that L Games has kind of, like sown the seeds, it's sort of made an investment in terms of bringing a different lineup and a different approach every single week. This is the type of thing that even if it hasn't gotten them a ton of wins yet, can pay dividends down the line, because it just makes preparing for them that much harder every single week. So it's something that just sort of compounds. I do like their approach, and like the way that they can, sort of be very difficult to prepare for from here on out.
Yeah, and it's honestly just like a terrifying roster to look at. A lot of these champions, you're just looking at them and they're like, oh, they kill me. They can kill me.
I think a lot of these decks are really are beatable, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we start looking at like Nardarius, that's a beatable deck. Mm-hmm. Zed Hecker, that's a beatable deck. Isjari Aurelia, that's a beatable deck. PNZ, like Teemo SI Burn, that's a beatable deck. Anivia is a beatable deck. Like all of these are beatable decks, but the issue is that what beats one of them doesn't necessarily beat the others. Mm-hmm. So it's very hard to prepare specifically for one of them, because the types of things that are very good against them aren't necessarily good against what else they have available. And of course Mythra is just on top. I do like their position. I feel like they've done a really good job of setting themselves up to be hard to deal with.
Yeah, they're definitely still a contender despite their current record of 1-2. I think they're definitely still a player to look at for being a top contender in this series. And not to mention, they're, I believe, a math teacher, so they're really good at these this numbers and calculating lethal and stuff like that in ways that you may not have seen coming. I've seen them play. It's quite impressive.
Nice. So if they miss lethal at some point, it would just be that much more embarrassing, huh?
That's a funny way of looking at it.
Maybe Teemo Burn might be the way to go. The aggro's great at counting to 20. For a math teacher, that might be the strat.
All right. Before we dunk on our Brazilian players too much, I think that is a great place to leave off for today. This will probably go up on the YouTube channel a few hours before games begin, so you guys have a last chance to listen to what we have said here today and do your pick'ems on the Champion Draft Series Discord server, which we do have, and you can find a link below the video. I think we also have a command, potentially. This might not take us to the right one. No, that's to our YouTube channel, but that also has the Discord link underneath it too. If you want to participate in the pick'ems, we recognize the winners at the end of every weekly recap. And we teased it a little bit last week, but we've also got a couple of surprises coming along that you definitely are going to want to be a part of the CDS to experience. I'm not going to do much more teasing in that regard. But
how did we do last week in our predictions?
We did. So technically you and I disagreed on a lot of different things. So there wasn't really one that we like all failed on. If that makes sense. But I think as far as week 3 goes, I think the one that I personally struggled the most with was Canadian Chime Slimes, who ended up losing to Sir Tournament. But and I did really terrible last week. Now that I think about it, because I put it Bust as over Majin. I got Seth over Slay. I gave L Games the advantage over Spids. Yeah, I did really bad, which I think means you did pretty good. I think that's what that means.
High rolled, you know. Yeah. Got lucky.
I guess so. But we'll have to see. I think with how we've agreed on pretty much everything except for the cephalopod matchup.
I think maybe the Seth matchup, and then I think the Jason matchup, right? Did we end up disagreeing on that one? I don't remember.
I have already forgotten. I was leaning towards L Games. Yeah. Okay. So it was Cephalopod that thought that Jason had that's what it was. Yeah. I think what happened was you said you liked Roji's lineup. I said, not Roji. You said you liked Cephalopod's lineup, and I said after the interview, I think Terman's gonna win.
Oh, that you lost you lost faith in him.
I think that's what happened. So that's gonna be the match to see which one of us did better in predictions this week, I guess.
Nice.
But yeah, this has been a long farewell, but farewell. Small Penguin is saying that he is going 3 for 5 every week. So we'll have to see if he can do better this time so that he can get recognized in our pick'ems. Don't worry, Small Penguin, there are still plenty of weeks left. But so long, guys. So long, YouTube. And we will see you all next week, which will probably be a little bit earlier in the week because of, the whole open and stuff. That's next weekend, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So might be a little bit earlier next week. We'll send notifications and stuff. But otherwise, take care, everyone. And thank you for tuning in.